Warning, incoming game over. Warning, incoming game over.
Hello, Game Over Vancouver. My name is Mark Sianquita, and we are here once again after the Canucks.
Warning, incoming game over. Warning.
Apologies. The Canucks finally lose on the road after an 8-game win streak against the Pittsburgh Penguins. This game is, if you just purely look at the final score, it was not as close as it was. We have a lot to talk about tonight. But to start off, to give a shout out to our sponsor for today. It is the flagship show of the Game Over Network, Hyperdrive Hockey, which is all things hockey across various leagues in multiple countries. Where whatever it is and wherever it is, Max, Daphne, and Kev have you covered for all your hockey news with a steady dose of fun and fan engagement. You can find Hyperdrive Hockey on the Game Over Network YouTube channel or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast on the Hyperdrive Hockey page at thegameovernetwork.com. To recap a little bit of some important news coming into the game today, the Canucks going against the Penguins after shutting out the Bruins yesterday. We made a few changes to our lineup. So instead of Lankinen starting for us tonight after a shutout last night, we have Seelov starting. We also have Archie Paynes out of the lineup and Max Sasson taking his place on the fourth line. With the Penguins, we are against Tristan Jarry, which one thing that Shorty said while commentating was that one of his favorite players was Dan Cluche, which I found really funny. Which a lot of, I guess, the kids my age, but when I was a kid watching Dan Cluche, I remember idolizing him as a goalie. Looking back, I'm glad we got Luongo. But we were against Tristan Jarry and the Penguins. The Penguins also had a new player, so Tomasino started for the Penguins tonight as well. Going on to the game, though, the Canucks give up a very, very early goal once again, so it's a lot more action compared to yesterday's game. The Pens score first after Seelovs gets a bit too aggressive. He overextends, the puck bounces off the backboard behind the net, comes out the other side, and Lizotte scores. This kind of set the tone of the game, unfortunately. Hronik had a bad pass originally intended for Quinn Hughes, gave up the puck. It was, I'd say, both on Hronik and Seelovs. A little bit more so, though, on Seelovs for overextending. But the game starts off 1-0 Penguins. And in my head, my instant reaction was, oh, cool, we win. Because of the fact that the Canucks have had somewhat of a habit of giving up the first goal. And I thought it was going to be pretty accurate in terms of my thoughts. Because Atu Ratu ties it 1-1 and rips it after having his shot deflected off of the Penguins defender, which did also have an assist from Mr. Max Sasson, who is now a point per game player for the Canucks, with 2 assists after 2 goals. Great screens from him as well. From that, I will say, going into this game, to me, this was very much a make or break it game for Seelovs, because literally with Lankinen coming from a shutout, and Seelovs only really giving up less than 3 goals in the last few games for him, only once, I believe. It was really a game that he needed to really show up. And unfortunately, he didn't do that because after I will say a big play from the quite a few big saves from Seelovs from the Penguins top line. Coming back from the commercial break, Raquel scores and makes it 2-1 Penguins, which I will say not fully. That wasn't fully on Sealobs because Juleson and Susie decided to literally switch from. They decided to chase the puck, and they did so together. Which, you know what, as a defensive player, you do want to do stuff together as much as possible, but not when Raquel is right by the crease and he's able to just tap it in. And literally after that, we go into penalty kill. Kevin Hayes scores another goal, and it, like I said earlier, it basically set the tone of the entire game afterwards because after that Kevin Hayes goal, we let in another goal from Brandon Rust, which I will say, great pass by Crosby, but we decided to push up our defensive line way, not, I wouldn't say too early, but we decided to push up and be aggressive very, how do I say this? Very soon, to the point where the Penguins took advantage of it. And keep in mind, the Penguins are coming from a multi-day rest, which is the opposite of what we had because obviously the second night of a back-to-back. But we just looked gassed that first period. We were chasing the puck way too much. We were playing out of position, and all of this was just the first period. Going into the second period, I'm glad to say it was somewhat quiet. We did start off the period with another Brian Rust snipe, which not only did he beat Tyler Myers easily, he beat Seelovs pretty easily as well. And it was very unfortunate to say that it was at that moment when I just fully accepted that I don't know when the next time we're going to be able to see postseason Seelovs play for us again. The last few games, all I've been seeing is AHL starter Seelovs. I haven't. He's been looking way too green for my liking, and especially with Demko literally coming around the corner, or Demko's return just around the corner, as well as Lankinen being able to play that 1A 1B slot with Demko once he's back. I just think Seelovs is just gonna have to not only fight for an NHL backup position, but fight for an AHL starter position. But moving on to the rest of the game, though, we did start to show signs of life with Mr. Pia Suter scoring his 7th goal for the Canucks, and at that moment it was funny because he, with 7 goals, at that time was the current goal leader for the Canucks, which if you told me that at the beginning of the season, I would not have believed you. But he, as a player, although he might not have the skill to be a permanent top 6 player, he definitely has the IQ, and he's 100% able to make use of the IQ that he has on the offensive side. But going into Going into the third period, though, we were down 5-2. A part of me was like, the Canucks still have a chance. And Quinn Hughes takes it on his own, dirty dangles his way into the slot, and he makes it look very effortless. It was unfortunate, to say the least, because he's seeing Quinn give that much effort. And I will say, if there was one player that showed up today, it was Quinn Hughes. This loss was not on him playing poorly. It was not on him not being able to lead the team. And he definitely proved that he was able to lead the charge into a potential catch-up with that goal. But unfortunately, the momentum switch wasn't turned on just yet. We got a power play, but that power play was also, it was very, 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 very lousy. We almost gave up a short-handed goal during that power play, and we just weren't able to make any chances. And you know what? Like, the last few games, the last few power plays that we've had, it's been good, especially seeing like the Brest and PD play the way that they do. I'm glad that PD actually has line mates to play with, but it's still the same. Nothing changed with the power play except for personnel. It's still the same cycle and pass and cycle and pass, and teams like with leadership in the team and veteran defenders that the Penguins have, it's unfortunate to see that power play the way that it does, because if a team knows how to fight against a cycle, and if a team can play aggressive like how Pittsburgh did tonight, it's not gonna work. They know how to play against us, um, especially if what's it called? Even though JT Miller wasn't playing today, if when JT Miller's on the power play and he's just passing the puck back and forth with Quinn Hughes, like those are two of our best players, and all they do is pass it between each other instead of looking to make a play. Same thing kind of happened today where we weren't necessarily making use of our puck possession in the offensive zone. Instead, we were just looking for the perfect shot instead of just ripping it and shooting it on goal and hoping that the breast gets a rebound. I mean, like, if we were to look at Kuzmenko, for example, in the year that he scored more than 40 goals, like, a lot of his goals were because of the fact that we were just shooting on net and him looking to get a good rebound. But we can't even do that if we're not even shooting the puck. So it was not fun to watch, to say the least. Um, but anyways, going back into the game recap, the Tachet looked to change the lines a little bit, so we did see Besser picking up quite a few more shifts. Thankfully, because since he is coming back from a concussion, he has been mainly playing on the third line, which I've actually found pretty interesting, because he was, instead of him playing like a first liner on a third liner, he was playing like a checking forward. Like he was forechecking, at least from what I saw, he was forechecking a lot harder than normal. He was actually finishing his hits. He was battling for pucks. I was personally impressed by that. But in order to potentially spark a comeback, Tatya put him back with PD, to no avail, unfortunately. But with this momentum, it did die out due to a penalty by Garland, which I thought was pretty weak, and a penalty by Aturatu. Thankfully, our penalty kill was solid in terms of that. All thanks to players like Bluegrain and Suter, who play really well in the PK. We were able to keep it at 5-3 up until we pulled the goalie. But keep in mind, the Aturatu penalty that happened like with less than 5 minutes in the third. I think, sure, he's green, sure, he's a rookie, but especially when we're trying to catch up, I think a lot of the times, as if you're young and if you are just really trying to really trying to make a name for yourself and catch up, a lot of the times you get really jumpy and you just try to make plays as much as you can just so you can help get the puck back into the offensive zone. But it's frustrating, especially when penalties come that late. But after the Aturatu penalty, we pull Sealovs off and we play 6-on-5. It didn't seem too hopeful because of how aggressive Pittsburgh was playing, but due to literally shooting the puck on net and fighting for rebounds, PD scored and it was 5-4. And to think that, looking at the entire game, when I say that this game wasn't close, it still did not feel that close. Because even though we were one goal off, that entire last minute was just us fighting for the pucks on the boards. Sure, you could use the excuse that we were gassed. You could use the excuse that the Penguins were well rested going into the game, but it was a tough watch, I'd say. And I think losses like these are needed, but I've I've been saying this ever since the season started. I've been saying this since the bad comeback loss against Calgary. I don't like how this team becomes an NHL Cup contending team only in the third period. I feel like we only start to actually want to make plays and play as a cohesive unit when we have to catch up, which I guess mentality wise sucks because obviously if you look at today's game, we were down 5-1. We let so many goals pass because we kept trying to at least be, how do I say this? We kept trying to be a team that is used to winning. But after only, realistically, before last season, we weren't a winning team. We didn't really have that winning mentality. Um, you can tell that the Canucks are struggling, at least mental wise, to really dig in to make those offensive plays. Like even in the game yesterday, that game was won through Kevin Lankinen and shot blocking, as well as bad Bruins offense instead of good Canucks offense. But when our defensive end isn't working as a cohesive unit, then it's not really something that is fun to watch and fun to experience. Uh, David in chat actually says Canucks have to find ways to earn at least 75% of the standings points in game on consecutive calendar days PT, because otherwise they may well and truly start skidding away from a playoff spot. I think our chances of being top of the division are up in the air, but I still do feel like once Demko comes back, like we're still a playoff team, don't get me wrong. I don't see this team not making the playoffs. But if it ever gets to that point, then obviously something needs to change. Um it's a bit tough, especially since like obviously back-to-backs are hard in any sport that you play, especially in games like hockey where like if you see if you see the calves on these guys, like they work so hard day in and day out during these games, but to not have enough gas to pull through at least the back to back, it's not going to be fun. Elfin Cliffhanger Canucks, hello, tough loss tonight. Very tough loss tonight. It was like I was actually saying earlier in this stream that this was not a close game at all. Sure, we only lost by 1 point, but that's only because we only started playing the game in the third period. I think it's tough because of the fact that obviously like it's very easy to want to make excuses. Like Besser is coming back from a concussion. JT Miller is away from the team. Our defensive end is off, but if we rely on excuses like this, we're just gonna end up in spiral. But one thing I do really want to bring up is a goaltending situation, which coming from. Actually, hold on. I want to address this comment. To say that we lost because it's a back-to-back shouldn't even be an excuse at all. Exactly, 100%. Like, I was on social media the entire game. Not the entire game, obviously, but like I was on Twitter and Blue Sky, and I was like, all of these people talking about how. My apologies. All these people talking about how the Canucks aren't playing good because it's a back-to-back. everyone plays back-to-backs. Sure, like, we don't get that day of rest, and we're not able to practice stuff that we mess up. But if you want to be a championship team, you take advantage of these back-to-backs and you play while you're warm. At least in my opinion. But yeah, great comment, Offrin. Um, but yeah, going into our goalie situation and going into the second period of today's stream, I wanted to give a shout out to our second period sponsor, the Game Over Network, which is the network that we're on right now. Game Over Network, if you don't know, is a independent production focused on community inclusion and quality people, which does include you guys as chat. If you guys are supporting the Game Over Network, we do have a lot of crowdfunding options available. In the description of this episode, you will find a link to our Patreon page, and we are also working on a page through LaRouche, a crowdfunding platform for companies originating in Quebec. For LaRouche, we are aiming to raise 15K, and if we hit that goal, we will gain access to government grants that not only allow us to employ more people, but we're able to start giveaways. We are able to give back to the community, and if you guys as chat, as members of the community, if you have any suggestions on what you would like to see as giveaways from these crowdfunding efforts, please let us know in the comments of this live on Twitter, Instagram, or on the Discord server, which will be in the description below. So I remember in the beginning of the season, we were like, our goaltending situation is amazing. If you look at any hockey content creator, if you look on, what's it called? If you look at, let's say, Sportsnet 650, or just any, I guess, hockey show, a lot of people touted our goalie situation to be top notch with Demko and Seelovs, especially since that goaltending tandem made less than 7 mil AAV, which it should be good. You know, we're set. Obviously with Demko not starting, we signed Langton to a minimum contract. But we were going into the season very hopeful because now Seelovs gets to really showcase his skills as someone that saved that playoff run. He's able to at least play for the team. But then when you look at his first game against Calgary, when you look at a lot of his bad blunders, if you look at the game tonight, I think Seelovs needs to get sent down, which is tough. Sure, you could say that the defense situation that the Canucks have needs to be fixed and that it's their fault. But even though a lot of the goals he let through were grade A chances, like, you have to at least be able to fight for those chances. Like, if we're looking at what's it called? If we're looking at, like, let's say just pure stats, like, he's at a 3.91 goals against average with an 8.57 save percentage. If I were to compare it to the Smith, for example, last year, he had a 2.89 goals against average, an 8.96 save percentage with a shutout too in 29 games. And sure, our defense was a lot more consistent last year with Ian Cole in the second pairing and Zadorov in the third pairing. But there were still times where if the Canucks are going to play like an elite team, we have, like, how do I say this? We have to be able to rely on the goalie. And sure, we left at least tonight, specifically talking about tonight, that fifth goal against Rust, sure, that's Tilo's fault. I do still think the first goal was also somewhat his fault for overextending the missed shot that bounced off the backboard. But, like, sure, you could look at stats and be like, it's not bad. You could look at stats and purely look at stats and say that Seelovs is not doing well. Like, I think I'll have to actually I'll check right now, but I believe the stat was in 13 shots it was 5 goals, and you could say that the defense was off, but you gotta rely on your goalie too, right? Like, you can have an elite team, but have a somewhat weak goalie and not have it work out for you. Like, if you look at the Avalanche, for example, you had Georgiev, who people were calling him Forgiev at the beginning of the season because of the fact that he was just letting in so many goals, and it it makes or breaks games 100%. And the inconsistencies isn't fun. Like, sure, he won against Chicago, only letting in 1 goal, but if he's going to be playing backup to Lankinen, his game isn't necessarily going to evolve per se. Uh, Often says Demko Lankinen tandem will be monstrous when Demmer is back. I feel bad for Seelovs though. He was thrust in the Cup playoffs early in his career. Would be nice to send him down for him to cook. That's exactly what I'm thinking. And by the way, nothing is perfect. Welcome to the stream. What I was essentially saying was on reply to that comment. But going back into sending Seelovs down, David made a good point in chat that there's a lot of goals. What's it called? There's quite a few goalies in Abbey that are also fighting for spots, and I personally think if we send Seelovs down, not only does Seelovs get to showcase his game down there, but the amount of goalies fighting for a spot hopefully would push him a little bit harder to really showcase his skills down there in Abbey. It's just it's tough because at the end of the day, as much as I would love to bag on Seelovs' game, at the end of the day, he's still a good goalie. He's still young. He's still young. He's still pretty green. He hasn't played a full NHL season yet. Excuse me. I think especially when Demko comes back, I see it as we're just gonna send Seelovs down, and instead of Lankinen and Seelovs fighting for a backup position, it would be Seelovs and Demko playing as a 1A or 1B. I think in the ideal situation, sure, I'd love to rely on Demko when he comes back, but Lankinen's just been playing so much better. Sorry, not so much better, but so much better than his expected outcome when we first signed him. With the Sens Sharks game that I would much like to watch now underway, and another post game stream. From the Canucks perspective about the start, I will be going, but look forward to watching the next game. I appreciate you, David, for coming in every stream. Thank you. Myself, Zach, and Kaja do appreciate your time every time you are here. So thank you. But yeah, before I get into the third period of the stream, if you guys have, what's it called? I just want to remind you guys that it is a interactive chat. I do appreciate every single comment that's coming through. Have you guys looked at, I don't know if you guys have seen any of the Abbotsford games, but you have Ty Young, Jerry Patera, and Nick Tolopilo all in Abbey fighting for spots. I've been watching a few highlights and looking at the stats, and I'd say, especially looking at Tolopilo's preseason games, I'd say he might have. I'm not going to exactly say that he's going to fight against Seelovs for an AHL starter position, but I think, especially since we saw Seelovs as a potential Stanley Cup winning goalie, I think him needing to fight for a spot after essentially losing the backup position on the Vancouver Canucks. I think he needs that fight in order to become that postseason Seelovs that we miss. 100% right. Healthy Demko. Seelovs goes down to the AHL. He is waiver exempt. Lankinen is not. The Seelovs deserves to cook in the minors for sure. Honestly, Seelovs, as much as I love him, I think we still need to give him some time to fully become an NHL goalie. I think we need to not so much forget what happened in the last playoffs, because at the end of the day, those playoffs are really fun to watch as a fan, not even as someone who wants to analyze the Canucks, but someone who just wants to watch Canucks games for fun. Steelhouse made it fun. A lot of his big saves were huge for us, but now it's more so building into that consistency and realizing that we need to figure out, was it a hot streak, or is he able to build into that Seelovs that we know and love in Abbotsford? If we are to win more games, we can rely on the goaltending, but not the extent where it needs to come in and steal games for a win. Our D, though, needs to dig in and help the goalie. I agree. But I think, especially when Demko comes back, the momentum shift that the team has whenever he makes a big save, I think it's something that's super underrated. Especially if it's a home game, every time Demko or even Lankinen this season, every time they make a big save, crowd erupts. The team has basically regained a new sense of, I guess, urgency coming into it. It's tough when, if you especially go like games like today, where you go into the locker room dejected and they have to really fight your mentality to get back in the game. It's tough if you're not able to make those big saves. If that makes sense. Think of Salo's playoff run as a teaser trailer for the much anticipated summer blockbuster. Very fair. I just hope that summer blockbuster does not involve both Demko and Lankinen being injured. But you know what? Best case scenario is Seelovs being our emergency backup goalie. I think that would be very poetic. Hopefully that doesn't need to involve Demko and Lankinen being injured, but I would love to at least see him be with the team. I know you can only really hold two goalies on a roster, but it would be fun. It would be really fun. But yeah, appreciate that, chat. But I wanted to quickly move on to the third period. I just had a quick tidbit, and then after that, I want to open the floor to you guys. But to go into the third period, the sponsor of this stream third period is the future Game On show. So Game Over has you covered after the game, as you can see with today. But in order to get ready to watch the Canucks, you gotta get your game on too. Game On Vancouver, which we'll be reviving very soon, is a short form daily news podcast covering everything you need to know about the Vancouver Canucks. Hosted by myself, Mark Sianquita, and Clarke. Get all your Canucks news in under 10 minutes, Monday through Friday, on this Game Over Vancouver YouTube channel and in podcast form, which you can find at thegameovernetwork.com/pages/Vancouver. So, one thing that I kind of wanted to talk about is, you know how if you look at the Canucks, especially if you grew up as a Canucks fan as a kid, you have those teams and you have those lines that you idolize. So if you started watching, just as an example, during the 2010-2011 season when we went to the Stanley Cup Finals, you had players like the Sedins. So you had the Sedins and Burrows. You had players like Ryan Kessler, Kevin Bieksa, Dan Hamhuis, and Luongo. And as kids, you like to idolize those players. Um, if I were to look at the Canucks when I was a young kid, it was the West Coast Express with Marcus Naslund, Brendan Morrison, Todd Bertuzzi. You had a blue line that consisted of players like Jovanovski, Olin, Sami Salo, even Brent Sopel too, honestly, with his hair. A beautiful set of hair. And funny enough, goalies like Dan Cloutier and Alex Holt. Um, there was a lot of, I guess, idolizing when it comes to it. And I was looking at what's it called? I was looking at the current roster, and one thing, especially because of the fact that so many people are coming back as Canucks fans. Like, I'm not going to call them out because of the fact that they're not true Canucks fans because they didn't watch the Dog Days. They didn't see the Louis Eriksson Canucks, or they didn't see the Oliver Ekman Larson Canucks. Like, if you stuck through it, I appreciate you so much, and the amount of patience that you must have as a person must be huge. But especially with new people coming in as fans, like, I'm fully embracing them. The Canucks are so fun to watch now, and I was talking with a friend, and he was talking about how the new line with DeBrusk, Petey, and Sherwood, it essentially has, and it might not have been as active this game, but in previous games, especially with Petey coming back to hopefully Goon Petey or F Boy Petey, which I missed the point per game Petey. I'm glad he's coming back. I'm surprised that when we were looking for potential linemates for him, obviously DeBrusk was there, but then you have Sherwood coming in, and he's a person that is coming from idolizing the West Coast Express and 2011 team, and he mentioned that this line was very similar, not so much very similar, but it's similar-ish to the Sedin line with Burrows. I don't personally agree with that so much. I think it's more of the West Coast Express line, but he was saying that you have Petey, who is similar to a Henrik Sedin, where he's a playmaker. He has an eye for the game, and he isn't afraid to get to make the tough play in order to make a play. You have DeBrusk, who, even though he started off a bit slowly this season, he's able to what's it called? He's able to be in the spots that PD can see that, sure, it's not going to be the same levels as Sedinery that we saw throughout those years, but DeBrusk has been finding the spots to be able to get tap-ins and snipes very, very clearly. But then he started to compare Sherwood to Alex Burrows, and I personally think Sherwood's more of a Bertuzzi. I don't know if you guys agree with me in terms of that, but I would more so compare those guys to the West Coast Express, where PD is more of a Brendan Morrison with a shot. DeBrusk is like a budget Marcus Naslund, with a bit, how do I say this? I don't want to say a hint of Kuzmenko, but like the good parts of Kuzmenko. But when people talk about like the resurgence of big players on the Canucks that are able to be physical, I think of Bertuzzi. Sure, like Sherwood came into this team looking like being a bot 6 player, but his offensive game has been pretty impressive, I will say. I'm not sure if you guys agree with that, but I just wanted to give that tidbit out. That's all. What do you guys think? And honestly, if you guys don't have any opinions on that, that's perfectly fine. That was just more so a small tidbit that I wanted to throw out there. But if there isn't anything from chat about that, I wanted to slowly transition into overtime. And whatever going into our last sponsor, what better way to support something that you love, which might be the Game Over Network? If you want to support us, you can support us by buying merch. So going to this QR code on stream here, what better way to support something you love than by rocking it as clothing? Game Over apparel line has dropped with 3 unique designs. So whether you feel the nostalgic pull of our retro skater design, want to make a statement with our established design, or you want to wear your love for goalies proudly with our live and die by the goalie design, we have you covered. Designed by Brady from Game Over Winnipeg. Use the QR code on stream now, which I will put again, and take a look through our apparel store and help us rebuild local sports media in Canada while repping your community. Elfrin, growing up idolizing the Sedins, I could see how the PDDB Woody line can be compared to the Sedin line. The only difference is that the Steens and Burrows are more assertive with the puck than of the PD line. Very fair. I think that was more of a chemistry thing, I will say, especially since the PDDB Woody line is still pretty new. I'm not gonna say that they have the potentials to be the Sedins, but they do definitely are showing glimpses of being a top line for the Canucks that kids nowadays might be able to idolize. Actually, one thing that I did want to go back on, at least, if we're going to talk about comparing players to before, I how do I say this? My favorite player during the 2011 playoff series was Ryan Kesler because of how do I say it? Because of how gritty he was, while still being one of the best two-way players that the Canucks have seen. I think I was talking with my friend about this too. Like, it's very, you can see that Ryan Kesler like game in JT Miller, and I think that's why I like JT Miller so much as a player, because of the fact that he's able to really get gritty like Kesler. But yeah, they're gonna cook for sure. I agree, Alfred. But yeah. You know what? I think that PDDB Depressed Klein might actually have the potential to be one of the best lines in the Canucks. That's a hot take. But if Sherwood is able to elevate his game to a potential Todd Bertuzzi or an Alex Burrows like game where he could translate his grittiness into the offensive zone, I definitely see it come, let's say, February. I definitely see this line being a true force. Miller does have more of the FU game like Kessler. Agreed. 100%. He is a player that basically he doesn't give a fuck. He will win the puck whenever he wants. He will fight for it, even if it might be a losing battle for the puck. But he will always give 110% to his game, which I'm obviously not going to assume anything, but I think him taking time off is well needed, just so he could get back to that same Miller that we love. But yeah, I think from that point, I think that is a good time to potentially end the show. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for stopping by to Game Over Vancouver. It was a tough loss tonight, but I'm glad that you guys all came out to support the show. My name is Mark Sianquita. Thank you.